Hey there folks, Wrel here. Today we're going to be reviewing the Spiker, which is one of the newer sidearms for the Vanu Sovereignty. But before we get into the details, I'd like to advise you not to buy this weapon yet. It's made of false hope and broken promises, and you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. Getting that out of the way, we're going to look at the stats, we're going to talk about where it has potential, and how it can be improved. The Spiker will run you 1000 certs or 700 station cash to unlock, and the main hook with the Spiker is that it has a charge-up effect, much like the Lancer or the phase shift. Unlike the Lancer, however, the charge-up mechanic can be somewhat misleading because the amount of time it takes you to reach a full charge is nowhere near what the sound effects would have you think. The upside, however, is that you can actually hold the charge forever, unlike the Lancer or phase shift, which would automatically discharge after a certain amount of time. Initially, the Spiker is a 2-shot burst, and then after a charge-up delay of just barely under 1 second, it jumps to a 6-shot burst. So from start to finish, it takes about 1.35 seconds to reach and then fully release a 6-round charge based on personal testing. In itself, the charge-up time is really not the issue. What makes it such a terrible hindrance is that while charging, you can't run, and you're actually subjected to the same movement speed that you would have if you were firing from the hip, which is 75% of your normal movement speed. In PlanetSide 2, slow or stationary targets are dead targets, and this is one of the reasons why the Orion has such a huge advantage over other weapons in its class. It's also worth noting that you can't charge the weapon while cloaked, and cloaking will cancel the active charge, which means that it's not a good weapon for infiltrators to try and ambush people with. Each shot from that burst deals 167 damage at 10 meters, and then drops off to 84 damage at 60 meters. That's a 6-shot kill at 10 meters, 7 shots until 24 meters, and then it eventually drops down to a 12-shot kill. The Spiker technically refires at 366 rounds per minute, or 6.1 bursts per second, but I say technically because here's the thing. The truth of the matter is that you're never going to be able to take advantage of the Spiker's actual rate of fire in a combat situation, outside of using macros or something equally ridiculous. And to explain this, here's how a standard burst fire weapon or any really low rate of fire weapon works. When you click the mouse, you fire off a volley, and while that volley is being fired, you can click and hold the mouse again, and the weapon will immediately refire as soon as it possibly can. This is the maximum rate of fire. With the Spiker, you have to click the mouse, and then when you let go of it, it fires off the volley. Meaning if you click and hold to try and fire as quickly as possible, you simply start charging the weapon instead of allowing it to fire as soon as it possibly is able to. This means two things. The first is that it's always up to you to have the absolute best possible timing to maximize the weapon's rate of fire. The second is that if you let go of the mouse too early, you aren't going to fire the weapon at all. So basically, you're always going to be prone to a margin of error, unlike with the standard burst weapons that can almost be used as if they were automatic. You can actually fire the weapon at its maximum rate of fire if you have extremely quick fingers and that's all you're focusing on, but from a functional perspective, it's just not going to happen in any reliable fashion. If you want to understand a little bit more about what I'm saying, I did a video a while back talking about how to increase your rate of fire with semi-auto and burst fire weapons, and it's worth a watch if you want to know just how much spam clicking can actually hurt you. That said, the Spiker takes this problem to extremes, and it's a great example of how the spreadsheet balance might make sense, but in function, it just doesn't work out that way. Continuing on, the Spiker has an 18-round magazine with 90 in reserve, and 18 rounds per mag means that you're able to dump 3 full charges before depleting. It reloads in 1.5 seconds short and 1.845 seconds long, which is on par with its other options. I'm not going to go into specifics regarding the recoil characteristics and cone of fire because you can basically sum it up in a single sentence by saying that the Spiker is a little bit less accurate than every other option you have available. So if you take all these attributes and put them all together, you basically have a pistol with a lot of problems. The first is that the pistol doesn't function as a last-ditch means to defend yourself, and by that I mean the same way that every other pistol in the game does. If you run out of ammo in your primary, then you pull out your secondary, you finish off your opponent. That's how pistols usually work. Due to the extremely low damage output and rate of fire, every other pistol in the game is more suitable to the task. Just to drill that point home a little bit, at its absolute best, the Spiker has the lowest DPS of any pistol in the VS arsenal. In fact, the time it takes to gather and successfully execute a 6-round burst has more alpha, but does less DPS overall. The Beamer has 1,255 damage per second, the Cerberus has 1,250 damage per second, the Manicore has 1,170 damage per second, and the Spiker is a low 1,018 damage per second, and only about 742 damage per second-ish if you're spamming 6-shot charge-ups. Again, remember that this is ignoring the inherent flaws with spamming the Spiker's trigger, and it's assuming that you're using its maximum rate of fire. And you may think to yourself, well, maybe this pistol isn't supposed to be a last-ditch sidearm. Maybe it's supposed to work more like a crossbow, and that it has really good alpha burst. And the problem with that is that in order to function at the weapon's highest potential, you need to sit in the open for roughly a second, be within 10 meters of an opponent, not miss any shots, and also hope that they don't have nanoweave or heavy assault shield activated. If you can't do all of those things every single time, then you're better off running a crossbow, a commissioner, or even an underboss. The weapon isn't accurate enough to consistently drop targets outside of its 6-shot kill range, especially if they already know that you're around, which, thanks to being uncloaked, slowing you down, and charging up loudly, it's a definite possibility. But let's say that for some reason you bought the Spiker and you just really want to use it. Some basic strategies are as follows. Firstly, you do want to initiate with a 6-round burst when the opportunity is available, and that opportunity will present itself when you are going to be able to get the jump on your opponent, meaning that your sidearm is charged, ready to go, you know exactly where the enemy is on the map, which direction they're facing, you know, thanks to a motion spotter or what have you, and you want there to be only one enemy, because chances are they're going to be running nanoweave, or it's going to be a heavy with the shield up, and you're going to miss at least one round, or have one go into the leg, and because of that, you're likely to end up trading some damage at the very least. The second tip is that you do want to land headshots, and you can do this by aiming at the head and then dragging pretty hard downwards. There is some above average kill potential here in this weapon when it comes to landing headshots. The problem is that it's very difficult to do in most situations. And lastly, just go for weakened targets. Enhanced targeting is going to help you do this, and it's going to make your weapon more consistent overall. Outside of that, how would you go about improving the Spiker? I know this wasn't a full review, but honestly I don't think the weapon really warrants one just yet, and it definitely needs some tweaks. From my perspective, there's plenty of ways that you can pull it off. You could just up the rate of fire a considerable amount, which would account for the wonkiness of the weapon's firing mechanism, but that would basically turn the pistol into something that it doesn't need to be, making it much too similar to other options already available. If you didn't want to do that, you could just remove the charge up mechanic altogether and make it a 6-shot burst by default, and then you lower its rate of fire to compensate. That'd make it a very unique weapon in itself, more like a commissioner mixed with a repeater, and would be something that the game hasn't seen just yet. But what I'd personally like to see done is just being able to move at full speed while charging the weapon. I think that would allow it to serve its intended role of alpha damage while also justifying it being subpar in other respects. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you are one of the unfortunate souls who bought the Spiker already, or for some reason you don't think it's all that bad, just let me hear those thoughts in the comment section down below. And if there's a particular weapon that you would like to see reviewed in the future, you can leave those comments down there as well. Thanks very much, folks. Wrel signing off.